Joining us now for some analysis on Biden's speech in the final night of the Democratic National Convention, our political reporter Taman Bradley, as well as our political analyst Paul Lisnek. Thank you for being with us tonight. Let's start with each of your takeaways.
Well, I'll begin, and I want to say the question here tonight was Democrats who were concerned whether Joe Biden could deliver a speech with passion and compassion and strength. Their goals were met. I think Democrats will be happy with the performance of Vice President Biden tonight, but it wasn't necessarily directed to them. Will any Trump supporters or strongly hold Republicans switch over to Joe Biden? Probably not. But independents and those Republicans who are looking for an option throughout the week were encouraged that this would be the time to take the chance. I think Joe Biden gave them enough tonight to show his strength. He called out the president. He was tough in his language, and I think all of that will work to his. It's hard to give him a bad grade for it tonight. We'll see what minds he changes in the polls to come.
I think that's exactly right. Decency was the word of the week. We didn't hear the word progressive all that much. This format certainly worked for Joe Biden. He didn't have to interact with an audience. It played to his strengths, which is to slow down in his speech, to open up, to show his humanity, to show his compassion. I think the Biden campaign will be very pleased with how their candidate did tonight, and overall with the convention, making an appeal to the center, making an appeal to independent voters, Republicans, not trying to scare away the center and the right of the country with some of the progressive policies that Bernie Sanders and AOC were advocating for.
Political consultant David Axelrod said that this was not a convention speech, but more of a presidential address. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I don't think this, listen, he didn't have a room full of people to be talking to. In fact, and I think you have the sense when this was over, will we ever go back to conventions the way they were? Because this played as a decent television show all week long. I'm sure Republicans will do the same. He was giving a speech to the nation tonight. He was not speaking to a convention hall. That's what Joe Biden needed to do. That was critical this time around, and that's why I think he was effective, and that's why Axelrod made the comment that he did.
Can I just add, too, that Joe Biden is known to be something of a gaffe machine. There were no mistakes made tonight. There was nothing that he could give President Trump to work with in terms of tweeting out something that could be a viral moment and distract people from the message of his speech tonight.
One could argue that calling him Sleepy Joe for all of these many months now almost lowered the bar for Biden's performance tonight, made it easier for him to get through it without any major gaffes. I wonder what you think the Republicans have to do next week to counter what we've seen in the last 4 nights.
Well, I think we're going to see the opposite of a lot of what we've heard this whole week. We've heard the topics of immigration, of racism, those kind of things. I think we're going to get the Republican response. We know, for example, Republicans will have that couple from St. Louis who came out during the protest with guns and arms. We know they're speaking to the convention. So I think we're going to hear about protecting America. I think we're going to hear about strength and the strength that President Trump brings. So it'll be something that we'll have to have Democrats remind themselves of what it is they've heard this week. I did want to make a quick mention of 13-year-old Braden Harrington. You're going to hear a lot about him. He's the little kid who had the stuttering issue that Vice President Biden helped him work through, and he spoke tonight. I think that stole the hearts of a lot of people, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise. It was a moving moment.
Let's listen to some of his speech when he talked about how he will draw on the best of us.
What we know about this president is if he's given 4 more years, he'll be what he's been for the last 4 years. A president who takes no responsibility, refuses to lead, blames others, cozies up to dictators, and fans the flames of hate and division. He'll wake up every day believing the job is all about him, never about you. Is that the American you want for you?
So, Paul, everyone keeps saying about the gaffes and things like that. Joe Biden has always spoken from the heart, wouldn't you say? And that's what tonight was.
Well, yeah, and as Taman said, there were no gaffes tonight. Look, this was a written speech. He's been working on this a very long time. I'm sure he went through it several times. So it's a good thing he went through this without any problems or any gaffes. He should. There'll be more to come, I'm sure. But tonight was a speech that the Democrats will be able to showcase going forward throughout the convention, throughout the election season. It's going to be important that they be able to do it to create this compassionate image and juxtapose that to President Trump, who will have his stage turn next week.
Taman, let me ask you this, to go to another point. We have been saying all along that they haven't talked a lot about policy during this convention week, but tonight he touched upon a lot of policy, didn't he?
Well, he began the conversation with some policy, talking about climate change, and being a president who the troops will respect. And making sure that he expands on the Affordable Care Act, not in favor of a Medicare for all, but he does favor a public option. But we've said it all week. There haven't been a lot of specifics about policy. That's because Democrats are not in total agreement. I'm thinking of Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who was talking about climate change, but we didn't hear exactly what Democrats want to do in terms of climate change. And so we know Joe Biden's favorite ice cream flavors, but we maybe don't know where he stands, what he would do to have peace in the Middle East.
These speeches tend to be a lot like looking at a buffet full of tasty treats, but not talking about how much it's going to cost. Next week, do you predict a darker convention, more of a talk about crime and riots and looting and protests? I was 4 years ago in Cleveland when Donald Trump accepted the nomination, and he said he'd be the law and order president, and crime would miraculously stop. Violent crime would stop soon after he became
the chairwoman of the
president.
RNC says that it will be much more optimistic. That's in a response to this relentless assault that Democrats had on President Trump this week. It's hard to know because Republicans are being very tight-lipped about exactly what they're going to do. We know President Trump and Melania Trump are speaking from the White House, but I would expect a lot of policy, a lot of contrast to show the message that what they've done really the entire campaign is that Joe Biden's not making the decisions. It's AOC, it's Bernie Sanders, it's a lot of elitist Democrats who are coming up with policy proposals, and they're going to really be driving this thing. Kamala Harris as well, too.
And quickly, Democrats will see it as a dark week, but it'll be what Republicans want to hear. It will be light to them. And so, as Taman says, we'll be hearing about these same issues, but from a very different perspective, and it's one designed for Republicans.
All right, Paul Lisnek and Taman Bradley, thank you so much for your perspectives, your analysis. But you're not done, because one convention down, one more to go.
See you next
week.
week.
We'll have complete live coverage of the Republican National Convention throughout our WGN News at 9 and 10, and that starts Monday night. Remember, you can always see more of our coverage at WGNTV.com/election.